processes in impact assessment. And so I am here just to facilitate the dialogue a little bit. My name is Alex, and I am currently dialing in from Northeastern Ontario. And so I'll just take a moment to introduce our speakers. So we have here Tara Howes, who is a rural development practitioner and policy developer with over 15 years experience specializing in intersectional research, Indigenous settler relations, and integrating equity throughout the life cycle of resource projects. Her recent work focuses on advancing equity considerations and the use of AI for impact assessments, with forthcoming publications in this emerging topic. And as well, the co-presenters are Celisa Horvath, who is an independent impact assessment practitioner with 35 years experience in federal, provincial, and territorial impact assessment and regulatory processes across Canada, as well as internationally. She is the founder of the Canadian Impact Assessment Practitioners Network and the Atlantic Canada Association for Impact Assessment. She is also a member of Canada's Clean 50 Sustainability Leaders. And as well, last but not least, Nina Barton currently leads the socioeconomic group at Two Worlds Consulting and is focused on holistic community-based research that equally considers diverse perspectives and sources of knowledge. Nina has led components of many project-based and regional impact assessments, mainly in Western and Northern Canada. And her passion is to promote positive development outcomes for people, communities, and in the environment. And so with that, please take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Alex. Wonderful to see everyone here. Jose, maybe we'll just get that title slide up for a moment. And we can just kind of pop right into the agenda slide. Just wanted to give a little quick overview. We're all coming kind of from different spaces. And so I just want to make sure we've got a few minutes to ground ourselves on where we are within artificial intelligence and impact assessments. So for those who don't know me beyond that little introduction, I am Tara Howes, she, her. I am located in the community of Rosslyn, British Columbia, which is on the traditional territories of the Sinixt people, but also, of course, in the overlapping cultural and historical territories of the Secwepemc, Sihilks, and Ktunaxa peoples. And as we get into, Indigenous History Peoples Month, we have to really consider what does that mean for artificial intelligence. And so I'm really hoping we have the opportunity to explore some of these questions on what does artificial intelligence systems mean for Indigenous peoples in Canada, especially when we have, a new Minister of Artificial Intelligence now in Canada. We have a couple of bills that have passed in BC and in Canada and Ontario related to fast tracking and efficiencies of projects. And so there's a lot of things to kind of uncover and start to explore. And so we're just going to have, like I said, a very brief overview of that, and then kind of dive into the dialogues and have Celisa and Nina talk about how they're using AI in their work. So if we can just pop to the next slide. Artificial intelligence, we talk a lot about it, but I don't think a lot of us on this call are computer scientists. And I know I myself am a social scientist, and so I am learning, and we're all on this learning process together. One thing to really recognize is when we say AI, AI is not a singular noun. It's not just a thing. It's a system and it's a discipline. And so just like we wouldn't say we're going to use a biology to go conduct, fish habitat review, we don't say I'm going to use a singular artificial intelligence. It's an entire discipline that is a subset typically of computer sciences, and it has subsets within it as well. And so when we say artificial intelligence, what we're saying is artificial intelligence systems or artificial intelligence models. The other thing to keep in mind is that there's a lot of definitional ambiguity around what artificial intelligence is. Canada has adopted this definition for the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act. Key elements of this definition revolve around the autonomous ability of these systems to process data, but also related to the adaptability and ensuring that there is a constant learning within the artificial intelligence system. And if we can just go to the next slide, Jose. But when we talk about learning, we have to recognize there's sort of these different tiers of artificial intelligence that most kind of academics and practitioners are using. And so I just want to give a shout out there to Melanie Demers from Two Worlds Consulting for allowing us to use this slide. She developed this, which Nina, I'm sure, is going to mention Melanie in her little talk there, because she's such I think, a big driver with Two Worlds for the artificial intelligence world. So we have these sort of three buckets of artificial intelligence right now. And we know that artificial narrow intelligence is presently the one that is in use. There's a little bit of debate about whether we're in the narrow intelligence or general intelligence realm. The big difference really being is how much human oversight is required. So narrow intelligence really requires that human oversight. It's absolutely integral to it. And it's really focused on a very singular, narrow task, sort of like ChatGPT, can you develop this text for me, or can you generate an image for me? It's very, very narrow. When we get into general intelligence, and this is where, again, some of this ambiguity comes into play, it talks about how the general intelligence can start learning from each other. And so there's actually arguments that large language models like ChatGPT are a form of general intelligence because it's learning from itself. It still requires a lot of human input to develop the underlying models and algorithms within it, but it is actually learning from itself. So it's iterative and adaptable. We then get into the futuristic sci-fi Skynet iRobot type of thing when we look at super artificial intelligence. And so we are very far away from that. That is very theoretical, and that is about the intelligence system being able to think and reason and actually possess those cognitive abilities that actually surpass human beings. So right now, for the most part, we're just in that narrow intelligence and possibly sneaking into the general intelligence, depending on who you talk to. If we can go into the final slide here. Because I do want to talk a little bit about the application of artificial intelligence in AI, of course. And so where I'm focused in on is about how do we integrate some equity into these applications of using AI. Whether we like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, artificial intelligence systems are being used right now in the impact assessment process. So my concern is that we have these two very inequitable industries merging. We have computer sciences and we have the resource industry. We do have the opportunity here to develop systems, policies, and practices that can actively start to mitigate some of those inequities. I do have two kind of papers coming out here. One sort of explores this general foundation of understanding this intersection of equity concerns using artificial intelligent models in the impact assessment process. And the second, I had the opportunity to work with this really great team, and we conducted an iterative experiment using ChatGPT to develop community engagement plans for sort of a random miscellaneous mining company. We were trying to explore where the failures of relying solely on these large language models may occur without any adequate knowledge. And so a couple of key things that came out of that experiment was one, a validation of my concern about that initial paper of exploring what inequities exist. Specifically, when we prompted that the company was going to be near an Indigenous community, there was absolutely zero mention of UNDRIP or free, prior, and informed consent. There was no consideration of any type of power relations related to gender. There was no mention about people of color, people with disability, or people within the 2S LGBTQIA+ communities. So again, it just sort of validated that initial concern I have about these two inequitable industries merging. And so I think as we go into this talk and dialogue, and hopefully if you take away some certain things, just remember that artificial intelligence systems are not a panacea. They are tools that can be used. And the second piece being that these tools require adequate training and expertise using multidisciplinary teams to be effective. There is a risk that we can continue to have harms on populations, but I am cautiously optimistic about the application of using artificial intelligence. And so with that, perhaps I'll turn over to Salisa first. And if you can maybe introduce a little bit about your work and sort of answer that initial question about how you're using artificial intelligence systems.
Sure. Thanks, Tara and Alex. Right. So my name is Salisa Horvath, and I am and have been for the entirety of my 35-year career a consulting impact assessment practitioner. Just to put my comments in context, I'll tell you a little bit about what that looks like. So my clients are typically project proponents from either the public sector or private sector, and across many economic sectors. So mining, transportation, energy, both conventional and renewable, agriculture, urban development, and so on. And so for these clients, most of my work focuses now on providing strategic advice about how to navigate impact assessment processes, how to get timely decisions and robust decisions, and decisions that can develop impact assessment materials that can stand up to rigorous scrutiny. I've also done a lot of work in assessment policy and methodology and process guidance development and training. And there my clients are those process administrators, the folks who actually run the impact assessment process, either for the federal government or provincial government. And so while I no longer actually write impact assessments, I have, over the course of that career, kind of participated and managed every aspect of the impact assessment, from planning and scoping and writing and analysis, but all of the complementary things that happen, including public consultation and Indigenous engagement and liaising with regulators and coordinating different disciplines and then designing mitigation and follow-up and so on and so forth. So I've kind of done the soup to nuts sort of gamut of things. And over that time, the practice has evolved considerably. The scope of assessment has broadened, where once, several decades ago, we mainly focused on biophysical environmental things. Now the scope of assessment is typically much broader to include social and economic and cultural and health and other matters. And, hand in hand with that, the complexity of impact assessment documentation and the process has increased. So while, at the beginning of my career, we might have fit a complete impact statement into just a few hundred pages and, in a single binder. Now, when we're doing impact statements, we're often talking about measuring that in inches of binders or shelf space. Thousands and thousands of pages, much of which is highly technical, technical appendices and consultation records and so on. And so, while we might, we're not here to debate the scope of assessment, although we could. I think we can and should talk about the current approach to impact assessment and what that means for Indigenous involvement and public participation and resourcing and capacity. And I mean, let's face it, no one has time to review thousands and thousands of pages of an impact statement. And that's the area where, in my experience, I've seen the most uptake of AI in the field of impact assessment. So myself, I've used AI to summarize content, like for my own use, like looking at some of these big documents and reviewing them and looking for, like, just kind of quickly get understanding of the context, but also to generate summaries to facilitate other people reviewing that information or quickly understanding that information. So that's an area where I've used AI myself. The other area of practice that I've seen the most use of AI so far has been in baseline surveys. So in the collection and analysis of data, such as remote sensing data, for instance, to quickly identify the presence and abundance of environmental components, such as, seabirds in the offshore, for instance. That's the area where I see AI being taken up more. And other than those two areas or those two applications, the use of AI in impact assessment has, again, in my experience so far, been fairly limited. I haven't yet come across any practitioner who has used AI to undertake the actual impact analysis, or, especially those key parts of the determining impact significance. At least none that have been disclosed to me, which is, something we can get into. Among the practitioners with whom I've discussed AI, there seems to be a general reticence to applying AI to any part of the assessment in which professional expertise or judgment is required. So again, like things like the significance determination, like how we decide at the end of all of this analysis whether the impact of a project is significant or not. And at this stage in AI development, frankly, that's probably a good thing. And in my direct experience, I don't, on a personal, I don't really trust AI yet. I for example, to conduct a literature review, I did a bit of an experiment a while back with some literature inquiries, and the AI bot, not only returns citations that don't actually exist, but when challenged about certain citations, the AI bot really, it seemed to obfuscate and redirect. To say lie would be perhaps taking it too far, but it was very difficult to get a clear answer, a clear explanation of why these literature citations that don't exist were presented as if they were factual. So I have a little bit of distrust myself in that regard. And so, there are limitations still. Um, and though, those who know me, and this is one of the reasons Tara asked me to join this webinar, you know that I'm actively engaged in the discourse around regulatory efficiency. And I think AI offers some potential benefits there. But the discussion around streamlining and efficiency is already fairly complex, and AI adds further complexity to what is already a challenging dialogue around what's happening in the impact assessment practice these days. So I'll leave it there by way of kind of summary. I hope that, Tara, that's what you were looking for.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Lisa. And yeah, the trust issues is a big issue. So what can be called hallucinations. Like I said, in the experiment that I did with ChatGPT, and UNDRIP wasn't mentioned. It's not like UNDRIP is new. It was adopted in 2007 by, it's like 145 countries have taken it up. So for, large language models not to be picking up on this very easy to access information does create those trust issues. And like you said, the complexity that's involved, and it really does speak to some more training that's required for all of us, I think. But with that, Nina, can I put you on the spot now I didn't put people on the spot. We were prepared. I shouldn't say I'm putting you on the spot. That's not fair.
That's true. I did
We're
expect
not, yes, we're not playing gotcha here. We're trying to learn and have some fun. So Nina, please take it away with how you are experiencing AI in your work.
Sure. My name's Nina Barton, and as you heard, I'm normally based in Victoria on Vancouver Island, in the territory of Lekwungen speaking peoples. Currently, however, I'm in Norway. It's a little it's nighttime here, although it's not dark because it's summer. So yeah, just to explain why I'm slightly blue. So I work for Two Worlds Consulting, which is, I would say, a mid-size environmental and social consulting firm, largely based in Western Canada. Well, based in Western Canada, largely working in Western Canada, particularly for me. I work on, impact assessments. I am very much still involved in the design and output of impact assessments. I don't exclusively work on regulatory type things, but yeah, as social researchers, we work for First Nations and Métis and Inuit communities, as well as government and industry on various, projects and other work, which does tend to be often connected to impact assessments. So I've definitely worked in that field for probably about 20 years now, and previously much more sort of in the natural resource management, jack of all trades, perhaps master of none type of realm, and doing everything from forestry and fishery work to more social and socioeconomic work, which I moved into essentially because nobody else really was interested or knew what it was at the time, the people I was surrounded with at my consulting firm. But I have to say, I love it. And so at my work, well, at a very basic level, of course, we use AI for predictive text, although because I'm kind of a curmudgeon, I wouldn't call myself a driver. I use a browser where you can turn that off because it annoys me. So that's just sharing that with folks so that you know where I'm coming from in terms of skeptic or whatever. Of course, AI is used in a lot of the tools that we use. I do find it difficult to get excited about a tool. However, as a tool that is already and will become very much more pervasive in everything we do, I think it's very important to be educated and to have the tool used in a way that works with one's values and the company's values and the values of the clients that you have. So that is to say that, of course, if we're extracting data from any public sources, we would be using AI, whether we know it or not. We do, in our work, we sort of use certain browsers, which then the staff, of course, need to be logged in. And so then the information that we're looking at is more or less secure, I guess, within our systems. And as Tara mentioned earlier, my colleague Melanie Demers is the head of our data management team, and she also presented a World Cafe style workshop at the most recent IAIA 25 conference in Italy, which was on this very topic. So at Two Worlds, we're of course very much aware with how AI can and is being used, and because we work with communities and we work with indigenous knowledge, which is owned by the knowledge holder and is always contextual and often confidential. And as Melanie said in one of her presentations, this type of information does not belong to bots. So that's something that we need to think about in our work. We're very focused on particularly Melanie's group, but this goes into all our work. We're very focused on data sovereignty, it being essential to respect the principles of Indigenous data sovereignty when we're working with other people's knowledge and information, and such as aligning practices with the OCAP principles. Which I hope I can remember. I'm sure other folks can, concerned with ownership of the data, who controls it, who can access it, and who has hold of it, who keeps the data, where is it stored. And just like to give a shout out to the First Nations Information Governance Center, who created the OCAP principles and trademarked them. So developing standards is where we are focusing a lot of our attention right now with respect to AI in our work, and standards for gathering information, for applying it in our work, and how it should be shared. And so this is all done in a framework for First Nations to assert their data sovereignty, which is key for what we do. Yeah, I can stop there.
Thanks, Nina. I appreciate it. I mean, this is definitely, I think I'd like to maybe explore that context of data sovereignty further detail. I know Melanie and I had some nice chats there at IAIA on data and how do we protect and how do we share, how do we keep something transparent that's supposed to be confidential, and there's all these questions around how to do that. This was sort of the end of our most formal part of our presentation, if we want to call this a presentation. I would love to have some questions from the audience. Alex, if you can monitor that for me. Do we have anything that's come in so far, or should we dive in with a couple other questions?
Nothing in the chat so far, but I will just put a call out to folks that are on the call. Please feel free to just raise your hand, or you can just speak up. In the interim, Salisa, if you had a wish list for AI applications, as a young researcher, I was kind of like disheartened a little bit to hear about the literature review applications of AI in impact assessment. I was just wondering if you could elaborate maybe a little further about potential positives that you can see that are useful but wouldn't infringe within a data sovereignty context.
Yeah, I think so. There's some really interesting work that's being done and my background's on the biophysical side. Like I'm a geologist, geomorphology, the land forms and stuff anyway. So I tend to be focused on environmental stuff as a personal interest. And there's some really interesting work that's been going on with some data collection. I mentioned the seabirds one, where folks are using AI tools to gather and analyze information, like for instance, in the offshore, gathering, like covering large areas, gathering data, and then looking at that data and interpreting it in a way to figure out, is that a seabird, or is that a whale, or is that something else, or is that just some light on the water, or what is it? And with these AI and other digital tools, like they're able to quickly get, essentially gather information that they would otherwise not be able to gather at all, right? So I look at that as a potential, an important benefit for AI tools for those areas where, in absent such tools, we know nothing, right? Or we know very little, or we're relying on incidental observations by, a marine observer passing by, right? and the ocean's a big place. So anything, and the, but the pressure, the interest in ocean development, blue economy development, whether it's offshore wind or other things, is only increasing. So it's very timely that these tools are becoming available, which would give us data to inform decision making, and make better decisions because we have better data. So that I find that very encouraging. And while I can't point to any other specific examples, I anticipate that there's other types of sort of data collection and analysis that is excuse me, is happening that similarly would improve the quality of the data and therefore the quality of the assessment and therefore the quality of decision making.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nina. I do want to explore a little bit here about some ethics and regulatory principles.
Just going to say we do have a question in the
Oh,
chat.
fantastic. Okay, yes, go ahead. Go with the question with the chat first. Yeah.
Sorry. Okay,
No.
so the question is, what do you expect in the future for the use of AI in environmental impact? And that was a general question, so maybe we can take a turn responding. Nina, did you want to start this off, and then Salisa after?
Sure. Well, I guess where I see it currently applied is given the right questions being asked and meaning the parameters which are placed and as long as they're good ones, it can generate good workable summaries, particularly of large sources of information. So, for example, if the team needs to look through 1,000 pages of documents in a short amount of time, that's a sort of a potentially perfect task, I guess, depending on what parameters are asked. I guess another thing that it definitely can look at is we've used, in some of the algorithms that we use to extract information, it can be very helpful in basically skipping over the tedious phase of extracting the data and making sure it's correct and making sure it means what you think it means so that it frees up time for say analysts to actually analyze the data because if you waste too much time actually getting all the stuff together, the client needs it and it has to go and there's not sufficient time to really think about it. And so I do feel that if used properly, it can increase the ability of teams to do critical analysis and hopefully produce more robust work. Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you. And then Celise, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I see a few other uses that will potentially emerge sooner rather than later. I think data mining is an area that I think we'll see more, and not just like the kind of biophysical or environmental scientific data, like the moose and spruce and things that are flying and swimming, but mining of consultation records, for instance, right? And typically in a big impact assessment where there's takes a long time to go through the process and there's multiple stages of consultation and engagement in multiple communities. And that's all very meticulously documented in tables that run for pages and pages and pages. And in each row of the table not only identifies a person, but often has like a dozen issues that they have raised or comments or impacts that they've highlighted as being of concern. So I can see AI being used to mine that data to kind of pull out, rather than having people go through line by line looking for any mention of water, for instance, to have just put the whole thing in an AI bot and okay, find all the instances where water was referenced or something related to water like fish. So uses like that, I think if they aren't already happening, I think they will be very soon. I agree with Nina that preparing summaries, I think, will be increasingly common, and especially so to support consultation and engagement, to take, a 1,000-page technical document and generate some kind of summary. So that's probably all I mentioned. I've done that myself. So that's, I think, what we're going to see most of. The other one that I wanted to mention, though, was where I think the future of AI is going is in actually drafting the impact assessment itself, right? Taking the data inputs and feeding existing impact assessments into AI bots and saying, okay, now you've read a few, here's the data that I have or the information I have on this project in this location, here's the baseline information, write me the chapter on the impact of the project on rare plants.
I think Celeste too, that dives in nicely to when we talk about data mining, the other opportunity that artificial intelligence systems can give us is that predictive modeling. And we're able to have probably more accurate and more options with a lot less time spent on that. And so we can start looking at things like risk mitigations on a grander scale, and have kind of those plan A, Bs, and Cs to understand what those actual impacts are. So predictability, risk modeling is also the other area that artificial intelligence is, and it is being employed and used in that way as well. I think some other questions are coming in there, Alex. So
Yeah, how about we turn it over to Barb, who has her hand raised, I think.
awesome.
Hey, yes, not as much as a question as a comment, and thank you so much for this topic. This actually came up recently in another community of practice that I was in related to human health risk assessments, and it was actually really incredible to see how it is being used to do literature reviews and do inform policy development, even on like developing standards and things like that. And one thing that was fascinating for me, and people here might already know this, is just kind of that whole like garbage in is garbage out. And so being able to search for it, like there's pages, like 5 pages of actual the query into AI, and the person that presented really related it, compared it to, it's almost like if you're a senior person, it's like you're treating AI as a junior person that you're working with. So you're quality controlling, you're double checking their work, you're making sure you're asking the right questions, your name's still behind it. But it can do a lot of the heavy lifting for you that, say, like a junior person could do. And it was fascinating on like the capabilities moving forward, but as a reviewer, it was also quite scary because it's going to be a lot harder, I think, to then give that review on something that looks very professional. It might be harder to pick up errors and things like that that get submitted by AI. And to me, I harp on this, I think, on every call, but the ethics is going to be so key. And we have really very limited ethics frameworks that manage the impact assessment field. And I think that's because you can have somebody that has very strong ethic, that does very good queries, that uses the tool as it's intended to be used and has a lot of professional knowledge, and they can produce something really amazing, I think, with AI. But then if you also can have something that is fairly junior, doesn't really know what they're doing, and they can produce something that looks really good. And I think that's gonna be the scariest part for me, for us as a reviewers kind of thing. Anyways, just a comment, but it was really interesting.
Yeah, no, you're totally right, Barb. And one thing, you'll hear the analogy of, artificial intelligence, it's your intern. You're the senior manager and this is your intern. And you have to give this intern very clear step-by-step instructions. You assume that they just know everything already. So they're your intern. Alan Ikirk with the Mackenzie Valley Review Board, he likes to compare it to 1,000 drunk undergrads in the room, but you still need your professor at the top of the room to review everything. So they're, again, very useful, but you really do need to have that human oversight, and 100% ethics related to transparency. Celisa, you said you don't know if somebody has handed in something to you. So what are these regulations that we need around transparency, laws, and ethics to consider? I'm not sure if we're diving into that question. I'm just seeing the chat going over. Just
and I think on that point, I think I've touched on this a bit, and I think it's sort of in the air. Like, disclosure, I think, is going to be an essential principle in impact assessment practice, right? The disclosure that AI is being used, how is it being used, by whom, and for what purpose, right? And so, over the years, in certain jurisdictions, like British Columbia is very good at this. Like when you submit an impact assessment document now, you have to identify who wrote it, right? And their professional qualifications, right? So that there's some confidence that, buddy who wrote the fish chapter is actually someone who knows something about fish, right? And he's an RP bio, like a registered professional biologist. So that's has been a requirement certainly in some jurisdictions already, and I think this is an evolution that disclosure needs to become common practice, right? AI was used in the preparation of this impact assessment in this way, and it was checked by this person, right? That kind of thing.
Mhm,
Mhm.
mhm. And then too, to echo, there was a comment, just echoing Barb's comment, that we should think of AI more as co-intelligence rather than a standalone thing, which is really, I think, good advice. There's a few questions in the panel. I'm going to try to work through them before our time is up. So the first one is, there's a lot of kind of rumors or discussion about how AI might take over certain research and writing jobs. And what are your thoughts about the place of GBA plus and impact assessment work within this narrative? Do you anticipate a shift towards practitioners being relied on for engagement expertise rather than research and analysis?
Yeah.
Well, I'll jump in there if I
Go ahead.
could.
Yeah.
I think there are certain aspects of the research and analytical work that it makes sense to use AI for. But I don't see the practitioner, the human practitioner, being removed entirely from that part, because there's all the data collection and analysis and interpretation, but at the end of all of that, there are value judgments, right? There is a consideration and a weighing of different contextual information, the context of a value component and the values that people hold in it. And certainly at the moment, and potentially never, can AI really bring the same kind of value perspective to bear. So I think there will continue to be a role for the practitioner in bringing that professional judgment, that professional expertise, and that the relevant values to bear on that crucial evaluation of significance and importance at the tail end of the assessment arc.
I think, Nina, you've got a lot of experience with Two Worlds doing this exactly, right?
Yeah, like one of the things I've learned, I hope I've learned, and when I'm doing this work, is that um every community is unique. And so applying these methodologies to, I would say, I do see it as a leaping off point, as a way to kind of circumvent some of the, the tedious, busy work of setting up the assessment, like the type of questions you're going to ask, but nothing could really take the place of asking the actual people who are experiencing the issues, and they have the concerns, and they have the interests in the lands and waters. Like I don't see that ever going away. At least I certainly hope not, because that would be weird. I find that people do get very excited about new technologies, and they want to apply them all over the place, and that's great. And I'm glad we're doing it. I'm glad we're talking about it, rather, because I think that in the context of working with GBA plus approaches and thinking about vulnerable groups and differentially affected populations, and really about applying AI in general to this type of work, we need to think about the inherent bias which is in the systems, in the AI technologies themselves, because they all, and this isn't my idea, I would like to credit a fellow called Jason Edward Lewis, who provided a chapter in a book called Imagining AI. And what he talks about is the inherent bias, because these systems come from Western knowledge systems, and so they lack in indigenous or other alternative type inputs in their actual design and application. So they're not there. And as a result, I think there are many risks, and I know we kind of talked about that this came up a lot in discussions I've had with Tara and other folks, just around the risks of AI, it is following the standard Western trajectory of, you know, we mine the data, we take the data, we collect it, we extract knowledge, and these are all very sort of biased terms that we're using already, I suppose. And so I guess one of the big worries that there will be a disconnect of this information. So the context can be lost, and the fact that it is from a specific community and specific knowledge holders can be lost. And at the one of the workshops at the conference, there was some talk about how this information can be stolen and used without consent or knowledge. So yeah, these are some of the things that come up when we think about it.
And on that, like, we have to recognize that, you know, there's a lot of languages in the world. And right now, I believe the stat that I heard was there's about 45% of languages are not covered at all. So only about 55 to 60% of languages are covered using some artificial intelligence models. And so we have an entire population set that is just unable to even embrace and using it. So we are far, far away from that super artificial intelligence, which is sort of where people think we are, but we are so far away from that. We still need people to be involved.
And then just as a continuance, I think, of that question is from there's a question that says, could AI be used in a way to check and ensure that gender equality and intersectionality is included during data collection and analysis?
100%. This is where we go into the training and the need to have human and subject matter experts. There are examples where teams have come together. It's again largely in the health field right now, for healthcare needs, where you know, people, the developers, like has been mentioned, are largely a very specific demographic that's developing these models. And if you don't have intersectional experts in the room, if you don't have Indigenous people in the room talking about how do you decolonize this approach, we're going to risk all of that. But if you have the right people in the room and you have the right teams and you've got the right questions being asked, then we can start, you know, reducing that garbage that's going in. You know, essentially we're going back to that comment Barb made about garbage in, garbage out, and trying to redefine this baseline data that exists out there. But you need the experts in the room to do it. And that's where I made that comment about being cautiously optimistic. There is an opportunity, but we have to start making active steps. And I think we have to start pushing our governments and industry to be doing better and ensuring that public disclosure is happening and happening in a safe, proper way.
Great. Any other thoughts on that topic before I move on? Okay, so there is another question that there is sort of the standard, which is to inform communities and the public of when and or how AI is used in environmental impact. And the question is, what do you think is the best way to communicate AI and its use, notably in plain language, and particularly when this process needs to be translated into traditional languages? That's kind of complicated.
That was could the asker either rephrase that or
maybe Jessica, if you wanted to just take a second and retype the question, maybe in a bit more of a direct way, and we'll circle back to it.
Sure, I can also explain it a bit better if it's
go right
that
way.
way.
Go ahead,
Okay.
please.
So particularly, I'm from the Northwest Territories with the Mackenzie Valley Review Board, and particularly during, say, public hearings or community sessions, our team has had the conversation of, okay, how do we get consent on how to use AI through environmental assessment, but how do you even proceed with explaining what AI is, how is it used, and then when we work with our interpreters, how do we even think about how do those words get changed into the traditional languages here in Denendeh and across the territory? And I just thought, was wondering if the panelists had any thoughts on how do we speak plainly about artificial intelligence, especially in something as complex as environmental assessment?
I mean, and I just commented on the language barrier, right? We've got so many, so that, yes. I'm not going to pretend I have a full answer for that. So Salisa and Nina, if you feel like you've got an answer to that, but at the end of the day, it's about having, again, knowledge experts being able to condense and summarize, and plain language is a skill, right? Being able to describe that is a skill. So that might be an expert that you need around the table to help with that. Salisa, Nina,
yeah, but I think, you know, in a way, it can be simply communicated by just using alternative words, right? We,
Mhm.
in preparing, for instance, in preparing this impact assessment, we used a computer-based tool to summarize the information, right?
Yeah.
And I think that just the term AI it isn't necessarily something that we need to highlight or flag that this is an AI tool, right? Like for depending on how it's being applied. So sometimes it's just a matter of using words, different words to explain what's been done and for what purpose, right? Um, Obviously that doesn't apply in every case. If we're applying like an advanced AI to do the significance determination or the judgment call or something like that, that would be a far more complicated concept to convey, but we're not there yet. And to Tara's point, I think getting relevant experts to help us kind of find those appropriate words or that explanation. But like anything else, we have a glossary at the front of our impact assessment that explains stuff like this. So.
I feel like in some cases it also may come down to consent. So if there's information being shared, sometimes people don't want the meeting recorded. And so that might also be, we're thinking of using a computer-based tool to compile this. What are your thoughts? And if people say we're not comfortable with that, I feel that should be part of the consent too. So maybe that will come up as well.
Yeah, and in fact, on that reminds me that I'm currently with a colleague of mine conducting a research survey, and in our consent section for the survey, we actually explained we might use AI to summarize some of the results, and in this way, but we wouldn't include your personal information. So it was right up front to as part of the consent piece. So I can see it.
That transparency is going to be a key thing. I think we're all going to hear. And Nina, you've talked a little bit about Two Worlds, how they have certain protocols in place, because we do have to have some type of protocols, and maybe at every company is going to have like a slightly different protocol and what that looks like, but those safeguards around who's using that data and where it's going is also really important. And if you're somebody in a community who's not incredibly familiar and you hear artificial intelligence is going to be used, but you're not understanding that there's security measures that have been placed around that data, so it's not just getting filtered out into a lot of people feel like it just gets filtered out into the netherworlds of the internet and used for everyone, and ensuring that those standards are in place. And I don't know, Nina, if you had experience with developing some of those protocols, or if that was more of a Melanie thing, but maybe you could talk about some of those.
Really, it would be up to the communities as to what protocols would be appropriate. But internally in our systems, we have certain safeguards and best practices, just like Salisa was describing, where everything needs to be transparent as to what we're doing, essentially, and as little black box as possible. And I think people fear change that is opaque, that doesn't seem, because you would immediately assume that something's being kept from you, and that's not a good way to build trust, right? So I think, yeah, it's definitely a theme emerging out of this talk anyways. Transparency for sure.
All right, and I see some pretty interesting dialogue going on in the chat, but no more questions as far as I can tell. So Tara, I don't know if you had a question that you wanted to pose as
There
well.
actually was one from Clemence. I noticed it because it's about fast tracking.
Okay.
Probably yes. Okay. So the question is, do you see opportunities for communities to use AI to strengthen their role in IA processes, particularly in the context of fast tracking projects in Canada currently discussed? Sorry, Clemence, I almost forgot you.
So yes, I do. Also, for my part, I do. Because just as a practitioner might use it to summarize information and things, I think those who are participating in impact assessment and reviewing impact assessment documents could use it not only to summarize, but also to look for things, for instance, compare this impact assessment with this other one. Like, are there issues that, that came up in these other, let's say it's a mining project, right? Or a port terminal or something like that. Like, are there issues that have been raised in impact assessments on other terminals that hasn't haven't been dealt with in this? Like, is there something that's not here, or does the media, like if you search the media, do you find, or concerns that are raised in relation to, say, a railway project in other communities which hasn't been raised in this assessment, or things like that, like to help look for things. So I think there's certainly could be a useful tool, but I also think that in order for AI to be useful, both to practitioner and to kind of like Tara you were speaking earlier about inequities, I think it needs to be coupled with more capacity building in digital technologies generally, right? Because we already have communities that are underserved or under-resourced in terms of whether it's access to the internet or access to digital hardware and software, or just a range of competencies and capacities. And until those inequities are met, then you're always going to have communities that are facing barriers to participation and access, right? So the more we're using AI, great if it's a beneficial tool, but we also have to complement that with capacity building.
And I think the flip side about fast tracking is that it can also, if deployed properly, and this kind of goes to your question, Jessica, it can support community engagement. And so if our communities that we're engaging with have a better understanding, because they don't have to go through the shelf space of binders, that they can actually read something in plain language that makes sense and they can understand, that can also facilitate that fast tracking. Of course, not in I'm saying this in a positive, well-being type of way. We all know there are processes that are not done quite so nicely, but assuming the proponent is interested in engaging properly with intention, with well-being, there's this opportunity for communities and the general public to start to learn and be better engaged with the entire impact assessment process, which I think is always a good thing when we have more public. Alex, I know that you're probably wanting to wrap up here. I will just make one little, sorry.
There is one more question.
Oh,
Can we
okay.
take it in? Sorry,
Yeah, let's do
somebody put
it.
Okay, it says, how are panelists aware of any impact assessment organizations in Canada or abroad with developed policies, procedures, or practices, resources essentially around the use of AI, and that could be used by assessment staff? And would you recommend any of them?
Well, I think all three of us will say the International Association for Impact Assessment has just released their impact assessment best practices guidelines, I think is the title of it. Definitely, if you're not part of the IAIA, it is a really great organization that does connect you with practitioners worldwide. I also know that I'm working with I'll be supporting Sarah Bice, for those of you who are in the community engagement. She's an Australian researcher and practitioner, and she's working on summarizing her information from the IAIA conference that just happened into sort of like a fast tips. So I definitely would check out that website. The entire conference that we went to, and I don't know how many people on this call were at, several people are on this call, was at this conference as well, focused in on artificial intelligence. And so I would point people there specifically.
I just put the link in to the
Oh,
best practices in the chat box there.
Thank you. And then I just saw somebody mention Denmark. I was just going to say the EU has been working on some regulatory. They've got some definitions developed in regulatory practices, and the Denmark is also actively embracing using artificial intelligence within the government system. And I also know that the Impact Assessment Agency does use artificial intelligence. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get them on the call today, but perhaps that would be probably a valuable tool to understand how our own agency is using artificial intelligence.
Amazing.
And so I guess the only one little thing before you finalize, I do want to thank everyone for being here. I really appreciate it. The one thing we didn't get into, particularly related to transparency, is the climate impacts of using artificial intelligence. Significant energy is used, water is required for cooling down the data systems. So that is an entire thing. And especially when we look at disproportionate impacts of climate change on populations, just something again to keep in mind to maybe generate conversation in the future. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you so much. And then for those that are still on the call here, I just wanted to point to those who aren't part of the GN network that if you're interested, you can check out our website. There are a lot of great resources on GBA Plus applications, and we do we have a newsletter as well that you could sign up for, and that will announce other future virtual dialogues. So I just want to take a second to really thank Salisa, Nina, and Tara for coming onto the call today. Really, really appreciate taking their time to and learning. I learned a lot in this. I have like pages of notes here that I'm gonna be looking at after. And yeah, for those that I do have one question I'm hoping I can ask them before we like let you go, but I'll let folks go on with their day if they need to. But I was curious about government applications of IA comparisons because that was touched on. Very excited. Thanks so much, everybody.
Go ahead,
you.
Lisa.
Yeah,
Thank you,
that's
everyone.
That's an interesting question, Alex. I'm not aware that it's been done. But as Tara hinted, we don't really have,
Starting.
visibility into what IAC is, like the agency is doing with AI or other jurisdictions. So it certainly wouldn't surprise me if that's happening already.
It would be very valuable though, because I think about, when we talk about the silo effect or like project by project, kind of doing the same work over and over again, it would be amazing to see these, assessments were advantageous in this way or these missed this, whatever. So kind of like an internal, almost like audit of like what's going on at the federal level.
Well, Salisa, Dr. Westwood's work is an example of that comparison.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was Alex mentioned specifically government's use of it. So I was speaking to that. So
okay.
Alana's work, as for those of you who are not aware, Dr. Alana Westwood is a prof at Dalhousie here in Halifax. And she has been working on doing a comparison of impact assessment documentation for mining projects across the country and comparing, how well the different jurisdictions, like the registries that each jurisdiction has, like provides documentation, how easy it is to get access to the impact assessments and the scope of them and things like that. It's really interesting.
I would be
stuff,
extremely
so.
interested in reading that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I can point you to, in the chat, I'll just put, so
Yeah.
we
you
have the
can-
Atlantic Canada Association for Impact Assessment. We just hosted a webinar for her, and I know we have her presentation posted there with her contact information. So I'll
Nice.
just
Thank you.
type that website in here.
I
And then you'll find
also-
it under past events
Okay.
there.
And I am sorry, I actually have a meeting I have to run to. Something got shifted to this time. So I have to run. I think there was chat about an IAIA debrief. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to touching
Thanks,
with
Tara.
everyone in the future. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for letting me ask my question there.
Yeah, no, totally. No, it's fine. That's fine. We're in the informal part. We're all good. Thank you.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been fun. Yeah, when I think of AI, for those who still want to chat, I mentioned not to apply it to decisions, and that's because the decisions aren't fact-based, right? Like at the end of the impact assessment, they're decisions that we're not just making with our mind. These are values decisions, or as much about not just what we know, but what we feel. And AI doesn't really get there, right?
Exactly.
In terms of making decisions with the heart and spirit as opposed to just the head. So
yeah, it is a very fancy compiler at this point, I think, and it's helpful to think about it that way because it can't come up with anything new. So generative in a way isn't entirely accurate, I would say, but it's extremely powerful at compiling and getting more so every day. If anyone here hasn't seen Terminator 2, though, I would encourage them.
I know when she said Skynet, I thought that was pretty funny. But,
so Alex and Jose, the folks who were on the call, were they all members of the network, or?
Yeah, they're all member of the network. They have registered to be part of the members, of the network, sorry, yeah.
Oh, cool. How big is the network? I mean, I just joined, last week. I hadn't heard of it before, so I'm glad to be part of it, but.
Yeah, we have 79 members now.
Wow, excellent. Good for you.
Yeah, we grew a lot, over the past month,
Yeah, excellent. All right. The more the merrier.
Yeah.
Actually,
Well,
we have the two co-directors of the network, so Alexandra and Leah Levac. So they are both co-directors of the network.
Oh, okay,
I
excellent.
was just hanging around to say hi because I hadn't been involved, so that was great, really interesting, and really nice job moderating too, Alex. It was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very exciting for me because like I think about a lot about time savings, like so much time is spent doing research, but and like somebody was talking to me too the other day about using in a literature context, like to do a meta-analysis, at least the initial scoping, like pull in of the information could be done with AI. I've never done that, but it's something that you can, start writing right into methods and whatever. So interesting for me, how much labor can I save doing this work? But yeah, still limited for sure.
Yeah, and I can't remember who asked the question or made the comment about, putting people out of work. To be a bit tongue in cheek, but I think, we're gonna have all those junior practitioners working hard to check over what AI is doing and make sure it's actually right.
Yeah. Yeah. Although that could also be a really good learning experience too, because when sometimes we have juniors and they might not be entirely clear on what you can produce and how it should be cited even initially. So I feel like it could be used as a learning opportunity as well, if done right,
Yeah.
if people have the time.
And that might end up being a college course in the future. There is just like how to spot AI.
I think it already is.
Yeah.
I know,
Oh,
I
geez.
know that oral exams are becoming more popular again, and so are handwritten. So poor kids having to learn how to write again.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and there's also courses on how to spot like fake news and fake content and that sort of thing. So
Like the next logical step, for everybody.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Think for
Mhm.
yourself, that kind of thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want
Well,
to thank you both for your time. Yeah. And thank you for hanging back for a couple minutes talking about AI. I love it. It's very interesting, very new to me. So I'm very curious. Thank you.
Thank you.
No,
thank
it's been
you
a
very
pleasure.
much.
Thanks for the invitation. It was a pleasure to meet
Yeah.
you both and or to meet all of you, not both. Obviously more than two people on this call. You know what I mean? So yeah, I better run. I got some work I have to get done, but it's been a pleasure. I look forward to participating in your future webinars. So
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much.
Right.
all right,
Thanks, everyone.
thanks. Bye now.
Bye.